High Counselor Vixara of the Galactic Concordat nervously adjusted her shimmer-wave robes as she watched the approaching human delegation through the grand observation window of the Harmonious Exchange Station. Her 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of acute anxiety among her species. The humans walked with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for creatures from a high-gravity world. Their movements were too precise, too controlled. "They're not showing any signs of fatigue," whispered her aide, Trelenx, his tentacles coiling tightly against his thorax. "They've been walking for nearly 30 minutes in our standard gravity, and their vital signs haven't fluctuated at all." "Suppress that data from the public feeds," Vixara ordered quietly. "The last thing we need is another panic about human physiological capabilities." The human delegation, led by Ambassador Sura Chen, approached the crystalline doors of the Grand Assembly. Unlike the floating hover chairs used by most species, the humans had chosen to walk. It was their first official visit to the Concordat's headquarters since Earth had been granted provisional membership 3 standard cycles ago. The doors whispered open, revealing the vast chamber where representatives from 500 species gathered for this historic meeting. The ambient light adjusted automatically to accommodate the various visual sensitivities of the assembled beings. The humans didn't even squint. "Honored members of the Galactic Concordat," Ambassador Chen began, her voice clear and measured. "We come in peace and friendship, eager to share in the grand exchange of knowledge and culture that has made your civilization great." High Counselor Vixara felt her anxiety ease slightly. Perhaps the humans would finally begin acting like a properly civilized species. The preliminary reports had been concerning. Their planet was classified as a death world with gravity 1.3 times the galactic standard, extreme temperature variations, and organisms that had evolved to survive through predation rather than symbiosis. "As a gesture of our commitment," Chen continued, "we've brought gifts. Examples of human innovation that we believe could benefit all species." The first item presented was a simple metal container. "This," Chen explained, "is what we call a thermos. It keeps hot things hot and cold things cold." Several delegates leaned forward, likely expecting some form of advanced quantum technology. Instead, Chen unscrewed the cap and poured a steaming dark liquid into it. "Would anyone like to try some coffee?" The chamber erupted in chaos. The methane-breathing Caxtil representatives immediately engaged their emergency shields. The crystalline Zarthi began resonating in their danger frequency. Someone shouted, "They're consuming molecular excitation agents in public." Vixara watched in horror as Ambassador Chen took a long sip of the steaming liquid, her vital signs remaining perfectly stable despite ingesting something hot enough to cause serious tissue damage in most species. "It's just a beverage," Chen said, seemingly puzzled by the reaction. "We drink it for pleasure and mild stimulation." "Mild stimulation," croaked Elder Eyes of the Silicon Consensus. "Our sensors indicate that compound would be classified as a combat stimulant under Concordat regulations." Chen's diplomatic smile faltered slightly. "I assure you, this is quite mild by human standards. Perhaps we should move on to our other gifts." The next item was worse. A human device they called a multi-tool, which the aliens quickly realized was essentially a collection of portable weapons disguised as utility implements. The fact that humans carried such things casually, even to diplomatic functions, sent several more delegates into various species-specific stress responses. The final straw came during what was supposed to be a friendly demonstration of human recreational activities. A young human diplomat named Marcus Wong offered to show what he called a simple exercise routine. The assembled delegates watched in mounting horror as Wong performed a series of movements that would have shattered the endoskeleton of any civilized species. He called them push-ups and jumping jacks, but to the aliens, it looked like a warrior's training routine. "Enough," High Counselor Vixara finally declared, her voice trembling. "Ambassador Chen, while we appreciate your enthusiasm, I believe we need to have a frank discussion about appropriate behavior within Concordat space." Chen's expression remained perfectly pleasant, but something flickered in her eyes that made Vixara's ancestry memory stir with primordial warning signals. Of course, High Counselor. However, I feel I should mention that we've been significantly restraining ourselves to avoid causing discomfort. These are merely the most basic aspects of human society we felt safe sharing. The chamber fell silent. The implications of that statement hung in the air like a plasma storm about to discharge. Restraining yourselves. Trellinx squeaked. Oh yes, Chen replied, still smiling. For instance, we didn't mention that this mild coffee is actually decaf, or that Marcus here is performing at about 20% of his actual capacity. We also thought it best not to demonstrate any of our competitive sports, given the reaction to simple calisthenics. The silence deepened. Every species present was suddenly recalculating their threat assessments of humanity. The thought that these creatures had been holding back, deliberately downplaying their capabilities. Perhaps, Vixara suggested carefully, we should adjourn for today and resume these discussions after some cultural adjustment periods. Of course, Chen agreed smoothly. We wouldn't want to overwhelm anyone, though I should mention, this was just the diplomatic team. Wait until you meet our Marines. As the human delegation departed, walking with that same unsettling grace, Vixara turned to her aide. Trellinx, prepare a priority communication to the Security Council. Classification level Omega. The highest level, but that's reserved for potential civilization-ending threats. Vixara watched the humans disappear down the corridor, their movements still perfectly controlled, their vital signs still unnaturally stable. Trust me, she said quietly, they need to know what we're dealing with. And send me everything we have on human military capabilities. Something tells me we've only seen the tip of what these Deathworlders can do. In the distance, they could hear Ambassador Chen laughing with her team, the sound carrying perfectly through corridors designed to dampen acoustic transmission. Even their voices, Vixara realized with a shudder, were more powerful than they should be. The Galactic Concordat had faced many challenges in its 50,000 years of existence, but nothing, Vixara suspected, quite like the humans. They weren't just from a death world, they had mastered it. And now they were loose in the galaxy, armed with their terrifying capabilities and their even more terrifying casual attitude about them. May the cosmic harmonies help them all. Commander Civilized of the Galactic Security Force rubbed his sensory stalks in frustration as he reviewed the latest incident report from Space Station Nexus. The humans had been granted a section of the station for their embassy and living quarters just 3 rotation cycles ago, and already the complaints were piling up. What do you mean they've converted Maintenance Bay 7 into something called a gym? He chittered at his subordinate, Lieutenant First Scale Zix. They submitted all the proper paperwork, Zix replied, her scales shifting to an anxious purple. According to Regulation 47B, species are allowed to establish physical maintenance facilities within their designated areas. We had no legal grounds to refuse. But look at these readings. Vax waved a manipulator at the holoscreen. The impact sensors are registering repeated shock events that would qualify as minor seismic disturbances on most worlds, and the atmospheric processors are working at 180% capacity to handle the increased moisture content. That would be what the humans call cardio day, sir. Before Vax could respond, the station's AI chimed in. Alert. Unusual activity detected in human section, Maintenance Bay 7. Multiple biosignatures displaying elevated heart rates and temperature readings consistent with extreme physical distress. On screen, Vax ordered, already imagining the diplomatic nightmare if something had happened to their new residents. The security feed flickered to life, showing the converted maintenance bay. What Vax saw made his exoskeleton crack in stress patterns. 20 humans were moving in synchronized patterns, lifting pieces of metal that, according to the station's sensors, massed more than some shuttlecraft components. Leading them was Lieutenant Sara Martinez of the Human Defense Force, her voice echoing through the chamber. Come on, people. This is just the warm-up. These are basic deadlifts. We haven't even gotten to the Olympic lifts yet. Warm up, Six whispered in horror. One of the humans, dripping with what Thavax now knew was called sweat, called out, "Hey LT, when do we start the real workout?" "After this set, we'll do some burpees to get the blood flowing, then hit the heavy bags." The security feed showed more humans entering the facility, carrying what appeared to be padded cylinders. The station's AI helpfully identified them as punching bags and displayed their mass calculations. Thavax felt his primary heart skip a beat. They're going to deliberately strike objects of that density, repeatedly, for entertainment. "Actually, sir," Zix consulted her datapad. "According to their filed activity schedule, this is mandatory physical conditioning for their military personnel." The scene continued to unfold on the monitor. The humans had now split into pairs, engaging in what they called sparring. To the aliens watching, it looked like ritualized combat that would have killed members of most species. "Sir," another security officer burst into the command center. "We're getting complaints from the Vennax delegation. They say the vibrations from the human facility are disrupting their hibernation cycles. The Vennax are 3 decks up," the Vax explained. "Yes, sir, and the photosynthetic collective on level 5 is claiming the elevated humidity from the human exercise area is causing premature blooming in their juvenile members." The security feed suddenly showed a new development. The humans had brought out what they called jump ropes and were using them in a way that seemed to defy several laws of physics. "Their vertical leap measurements are exceeding our sensor calibrations," the station AI reported with what almost sounded like concern. "Shut it down," Kafax decided. "This has to violate some safety protocol." "Actually, sir," Six interrupted, "I've reviewed all station regulations. They're technically within acceptable parameters since they filed environmental impact statements and installed reinforced flooring. The only violation is..." A new alarm blared. On screen, one of the humans had removed their upper garment due to heat, revealing their muscular structure. "Public indecency," Zix finished weakly. Lieutenant Martinez could be heard addressing her troops. "All right, people, that's enough warm-up. Time for the actual workout. Today we're doing CrossFit." The panic button on Thax's console lit up as sensors detected mass evacuation from the surrounding sections of the station. Several species with heightened empathic abilities had apparently sensed the humans' intention to engage in even more strenuous activities and decided to flee. "Sir," Six reported, her scales now a pale white of terror, "I've just received their complete exercise schedule. They do this 5 days out of every 7, and next week they're starting something called competitive training." Vax slumped in his gravity chair. "Contact the Galactic Security Council. Tell them..." He watched as a human on screen did something called a muscle-up that made several observing aliens faint. "Tell them we need to revise our species threat assessment protocols and get me everything we have on human endurance capabilities." "Already done, sir. Though you should know, according to their files, this is their light workout rotation. They're taking it easy due to the station's reduced gravity." The commander stared at the screen, where humans continued their terrifying display of physical prowess, seemingly enjoying themselves despite performing feats that would qualify as torture on most worlds. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "begin drafting new station safety protocols. And maybe we should consider relocating the Vennax delegation to another sector. Something tells me this is just the beginning." In the gym, Lieutenant Martinez's voice rang out again. "Great warm-up, everyone. Now let's see what you've really got." The station's structural integrity sensors began issuing warnings, and Vax wondered, not for the first time, if perhaps some species were better off left undiscovered. Captain Zena Brighthope sat in the darkened control room of Research Station Aurora, her fingers dancing over holographic controls as she assessed their situation. Red emergency lighting cast an eerie glow across her face, reflecting off the sweat on her brow. The station's AI had just confirmed what she already knew. They were in deep trouble. "Status report," she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. 12 heavily armed Nexa vessels have docked with the station, the AA responded. They've bypassed primary security and have control of levels 3 through 7. Approximately 60 hostiles are aboard. They're demanding access to the quantum research labs. And our security forces. The alien security contingent has been contained. Most species aboard have initiated emergency hibernation protocols or retreated to panic rooms. The only active resistance is coming from the human science team. Xena allowed herself a small smile. Of course it is. Get me Dr. Petal. The comm screen flickered to life, showing the disheveled face of the station's lead quantum physicist. Behind him, several other humans were barricading the lab doors with equipment that definitely wasn't meant to be used that way. Captain Petal grinned, looking far too excited for someone under siege by space pirates. "You'll be happy to know we've secured the prototype, though I'm afraid we had to sacrifice some rather expensive equipment to build our defenses." "Did you at least save the coffee maker?" Obviously, we're scientists, not barbarians. An explosion rocked the station. The A's voice remained eerily calm. "Hostiles have breached Level 4 containment. They appear to be using gravitic pulse weapons." "Those are bound by 16 different treaties," Xena noted absently, already formulating a plan. "Dr. Petal, how's your team holding up?" "Oh, we're having a blast. Did you know Dr. Chen used to do parkour? And apparently Dr. Rodriguez was a competitive wrestler before she got into quantum mechanics. We've already taken down 3 pirates who didn't expect scientists to fight back." Another explosion, closer this time. The station's lights flickered. "Captain," the AI interrupted, "the Nexar commander is demanding to speak with you." "Put him through." Xena straightened her uniform, adopting what her crew called her diplomatic face. The screen split, showing a hulking Nexar warrior, his cybernetic enhancements glowing menacingly. "Human captain," he growled, "surrender the quantum research facility, or we will take it by force." "I understand," Xena replied pleasantly. "And normally I'd be happy to negotiate, but you see, you've made 3 critical mistakes." The Nexar commander's biomechanical eyes narrowed. "Explain." "First, you attacked a research station, thinking scientists would be easy targets. But you forgot to check the species of those scientists." She gestured to another screen showing Dr. Rodriguez using a piece of quantum scanning equipment as an improvised weapon with disturbing effectiveness. "Second, you used bound weapons, which means we're no longer bound by conventional response protocols. And third," her smile turned predatory, "you interrupted their coffee break." The Nexar commander laughed, a harsh mechanical sound. "You think your soft scientists can stand against trained warriors?" "Oh, I know they can, but that's not what you should be worried about." Xena's fingers flew over her console. "You see, while you were focused on our scientists, you forgot about our maintenance crew." On multiple screens, camera feeds showed figures in environmental suits emerging from service ducts and maintenance tunnels. The pirates had locked down all main corridors, but they'd forgotten about the spaces between, the crawlways and access tubes that human maintenance workers navigated daily. "You should have checked our station specs more carefully," Xena continued conversationally. "These passages were designed for Ventilian maintenance drones, but humans? We can squeeze through spaces that would give most species claustrophobia. We call it spelunking." The Nexar commander's expression changed as alarms began blaring on his ships. "What have you done?" "Nothing much. Just a few maintenance workers doing some emergency repairs. Did you know that ship docking clamps require regular calibration? Terrible things can happen if they're not properly maintained." One by one, the pirate ship's docking clamps disengaged, their backup systems mysteriously offline. Emergency force fields snapped into place as the ships drifted free, their crews trapped aboard the station. "Now then," Xena's voice hardened, "about those bound weapons. Dr. Petal, Would you care to demonstrate your latest research? The quantum physicist's face reappeared, now wearing safety goggles. With pleasure, Captain. You know, it's fascinating. We were studying quantum entanglement for faster-than-light communication, but it turns out the principles can be applied to local space in interesting ways. The pirates in the corridor outside the lab suddenly found their gravity weapons, pulling them in multiple directions at once as localized quantum fields played havoc with fundamental forces. Science is amazing, Dr. Patel commented cheerfully. Also, Dr. Chen figured out how to reverse the polarity of their neural disruptors using a modified coffee maker. That was genuinely impressive. The Nexar commander stared in horror as his forces were systematically dismantled by what he had dismissed as soft researchers and maintenance workers. This is impossible. You're not warriors. No, Zena agreed. We're humans. We're something far more dangerous. We're curious. We explore. We figure things out. And when someone interrupts our research and our coffee breaks, she shrugged. Well, we get creative. Within 20 minutes, the siege of Station Aurora was over. The pirates found themselves secured in the cargo bay, their own weapons and ships turned against them by impossible human ingenuity. As station services came back online, alien observers emerged from their safe rooms to find humans casually repairing damage and discussing how to write up the incident for peer review. Captain, the AI reported, the Galactic Council is requesting a full report on how a research station repelled a major pirate assault without military support. Tell them the truth, Zena replied, accepting a fresh cup of coffee from a grinning Dr. Rodriguez. We did it with science. And somewhere in the station's maintenance tunnels, a human technician was already writing a paper titled Practical Applications of Quantum Mechanics in Improvised Station Defense, while hanging upside down in a service shaft that, according to official specs, should have been too small for any sentient being to access. Just another day at the office for humanity's finest minds. The emergency council chamber of Colony World Proxima III hummed with the nervous energy of 24 alien species. A massive hologram dominated the center of the room, showing the steadily growing crack in the planet's main atmospheric processing facility. Red warning indicators pulsed ominously. Chief Engineer Selvax of the Harmonious Technocracy clicked his mandibles in distress. The quantum containment field is failing. When it collapses, the resulting cascade will render half the continent uninhabitable. Our most advanced AI projections give us 48 hours, added Representative Cathol of the Silicon Confluence, their crystalline form vibrating with anxiety. None of our conventional solutions can be implemented in time. That's when Dr. Maya Patel, Earth's representative engineer, walked into the chamber carrying what appeared to be, to the horror of the assembled aliens, a physical toolbox. Sorry I'm late, she announced, dropping the archaic container with a metallic clang that made several delegates flinch. Had to grab my tools from the shuttle. Now, show me what we're dealing with. The alien engineers exchanged worried glances. They had requested human assistance out of diplomatic necessity, but the sight of primitive physical implements did not inspire confidence. Dr. Patel, Selvax began delicately, this is a quantum containment crisis. The facility uses 10th-generation photonic processors and… Yeah, I read the specs on the way down. Mai interrupted, pulling out something that made the aliens recoil, a simple wrench. Basic quantum bottle design, just scaled up to planetary levels. Pretty standard stuff. Standard. Kerfol's crystalline structure nearly shattered in shock. This is the most advanced atmospheric processing facility in 3 sectors. Maya was already walking around the hologram, examining the failure points with a practiced eye. She pulled out another primitive tool, a paper notebook and pencil, and started sketching. See, here's your problem, she said, holding up a rough diagram. You've got a cascade failure in the main containment grid because you're trying to handle quantum fluctuations with pure energy fields, but you're fighting against the natural tendencies of the system. That's That's how quantum containment works, Selvax protested weakly. That's how you do it, Maya corrected. We humans learned pretty early on that sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. Sometimes you need to work with the problem, not against it. She turned to the facility's AI interface. Show me the maintenance access tunnels near the main containment chamber. Human Patel, careful interrupted. Those tunnels are too small for maintenance drones. They're only used for emergency venting. Maya's grin made several aliens take an involuntary step back. Perfect. That's exactly what we need. Now, who's got some duct tape? The next 45 minutes were among the most stressful the alien engineers had ever experienced. They watched in horror as Maya crawled into maintenance shafts that their species had never intended to be accessed by organic life forms. She emerged covered in coolant fluid and quantum residue, still sketching in her notebook. Okay, here's the plan, she announced. We're going to create a controlled quantum bottle breach. The room erupted in panic. That's exactly what we're trying to prevent, Zelvax shouted over the chaos. No, you're trying to prevent an uncontrolled breach. There's a difference. Maya held up her sketch. Look, quantum systems naturally seek equilibrium. Instead of fighting the breach, we're going to give it somewhere to go. We'll use the maintenance tunnels as pressure relief valves, redirecting the quantum cascade into a series of smaller, manageable breaches. But that's impossible, Kerfel stuttered. The energy requirements alone would be massive if we were using standard methods, Maya agreed. But we're not. We're going to use these. She pulled out a handful of small devices from her toolbox. What are those? Someone asked. Raspberry Pis, simple computers. We'll network them through the maintenance tunnels to create a distributed processing grid. Add some basic sensors, a bit of code, and we can create a primitive but effective quantum monitoring system. You want to replace our quantum eye with toys, not replace, supplement. Your eye is trying to control everything at once. We're going to break the problem down into smaller, manageable chunks. Each pie will monitor and manage one section of the tunnel network, coordinating with its neighbors. It's not elegant, but it'll work. The aliens watched in amazement as Maya and a hastily assembled team of human engineers began implementing her plan. They crawled through maintenance shafts, installed their primitive devices, and ran what looked like ordinary copper wire alongside quantum data conduits. This is madness, Selvax muttered, watching the humans work. They're using technology that would be considered obsolete for children's toys. But it's working, Kerfel observed as the warning indicators began to stabilize. The quantum cascade is redistributing itself through the tunnel network. 24 hours later, the crisis was over. The facility's quantum containment was stable, though now operating in what Maya called a new normal state. The maintenance tunnels hummed with a controlled flow of quantum energy, managed by a network of simple computers that, by all rights, shouldn't have been able to handle such complex calculations. As the alien engineers studied the human solution, trying to understand how it worked, Maya sat in the control room drinking coffee and making notes in her battered notebook. I don't understand, Zelvax finally admitted. How did you know this would work? Maya looked up, smiling. Because sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best one. You were trying to force the quantum breach to behave according to your rules. We just created a path of least resistance and let physics do the work. But that's not how we do things, Kerfel protested. That's why you called us, Maya replied, closing her notebook. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When you're a species that evolved on a death world, you learn to be creative. Sometimes that means using advanced quantum computers, and sometimes it means duct tape and Raspberry Pis. As she packed up her toolbox, Maya added casually, "Oh, and you might want to update your engineering manuals. I think we just invented a new way to handle quantum containment. I'm calling it distributed quantum pressure relief through artificial micro-breaches. Though honestly, controlled chaos would be more accurate." The aliens watched her leave, then turned to stare at their facility, now running more efficiently than ever, managed by a combination of advanced AI and what were essentially human children's toys. Should we be worried? Cathal asked quietly. About what? About a species that can solve quantum physics problems with duct tape. Selvax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. I think we already know the answer to that. The first Galactic Olympics were meant to be a celebration of interspecies harmony and peaceful competition. Instead, they had become what the Galactic Sports Commission was quietly calling the human incident. Commissioner Zixval watched through all four of his eyes as human athlete Maria Chen prepared for her next attempt in what the humans called gymnastics. His tentacles were already coiled in stress patterns from the previous demonstrations. She can't possibly, he began, just as Maria launched herself into the air, performing rotations that seemed to defy both physics and sanity. 8 rotations on multiple axes while maintaining perfect form, noted his assistant, Telkar. The Centaurian delegates have filed another formal protest claiming illegal anti-gravity technology. We've scanned her 12 times, Zixval protested. There's no technology involved. This is just human. The arena erupted in a mixture of cheers and horrified gasps as Maria stuck her landing, the impact sending vibrations through the reinforced floor that had been specially installed after the weightlifting incident 3 days ago. Speaking of protests, Telkar continued, was still dealing with fallout from the swimming competitions. The Aquarian Federation is demanding we investigate how humans can move so efficiently through water without gills or propulsion assistance. And what about the marathon situation? Yes. Telkar consulted his datapad. 17 species have withdrawn from all endurance events after watching humans run for what they called fun during practice sessions. The concept of runner's high has been classified as a controlled substance in 3 sectors. The commissioner's attention was drawn to another arena where the human combat sports were about to begin. They had been forced to create a separate division for human martial arts after the sparring incident during the opening ceremonies. Are we certain about the safety protocols for this event? He asked nervously. We've implemented every security measure possible, sir. Though I should note that the human competitors complained that the safety barriers were, quote, taking all the fun out of it. On the main display, 2 humans faced each other in what they called a boxing match. The alien audience watched in horrified fascination as the competitors voluntarily struck each other with force that would have shattered the exoskeletons of most species. The medical team is standing by, Zixval confirmed. Yes, sir, though the humans assured us their own medic would suffice. Apparently, this is, and I quote, light sparring. A new commotion drew their attention to the track and field area, where human athletes were practicing something called pole vaulting. They're using flexible poles to deliberately launch themselves into the air, Telkar reported, his voice rising in pitch. For sport. Cancel that event immediately, Zixval ordered. Site safety regulations. We can't, sir. They submitted all the proper documentation, including historical evidence that humans have been doing this for centuries, for fun. The commissioner slumped in his hover chair. What about the team sports? Please tell me those are under control. Telkar's color shifted to a worried purple. Well, sir, about that. We've had to modify the rules for human participation in all team events. After the hockey incident, several species filed complaints about what they called excessive enthusiasm in contact sports. And the new sport they wanted to demonstrate, what was it called? Rugby, sir. Telkar's voice quivered. We reviewed the rules. Sir, they do this voluntarily, without armor. The warrior coast of the Proxima Centauri Alliance watched a demonstration match and declared it unnecessarily violent. On the main screen, the gymnastics competition continued. A human male was now performing on something called the rings, holding his entire body weight in positions that made several alien physiologists faint. Sir, Telkar interrupted urgently, We have a situation at the basketball courts. The humans are doing something they call slam dunks. 3 species have filed formal complaints about deliberate intimidation tactics. What's the problem exactly? Sir, they're jumping high enough to put the ball directly into the goal apparatus. The anti-gravity usage detection systems are going haywire, but once again it's just natural human capability. Zixval watched as more alerts poured in from across the Olympic Village. Humans performing parkour between events, causing panic among security forces. A group doing yoga in the relaxation gardens, their contortions sending several empathic species into therapy. Something called breakdancing that violated several laws of biomechanics. Perhaps, he suggested weakly, we should consider separate gains for Deathworld species. Already proposed, sir. The humans objected, saying it would be, quote, unsportsmanlike. A new alarm sounded. On one of the secondary screens, humans were demonstrating something called extreme sports. Are they jumping off high structures with nothing but fabric to slow their descent? Zixval asked in horror. Base jumping, sir. Apparently, it's a recreational activity on Earth. Recreational. The Commissioner's color patterns shifted to emergency frequencies. They do this for fun. Yes, sir. Though they assured us this is the tame version, since we wouldn't approve their original demonstration of wingsuit flying. The day continued with a steady stream of incidents, humans proving they could sprint at speeds that qualified as vehicle traffic on some worlds. Demonstration of something called CrossFit that had to be moved to a reinforced facility after structural concerns were raised. A human child doing cartwheels that caused a diplomatic incident with the High Gravity Confederation. As the sun set on another day of the first Galactic Olympics, Commissioner Zixval sat in his office reviewing the list of complaints, protests, and urgent regulation revision requests. Tell Carr, he said quietly, do you know what humans call these Olympics? According to their media, sir, they're referring to it as refreshingly casual and a nice friendly competition. The commissioner stared at footage of humans participating in something called a triathlon, combining multiple endurance events into what they considered a single sport. Schedule an emergency session of the Games Committee, he ordered, and perhaps we should review those proposals for separate Deathworld competitions again, for safety reasons. The humans won't like it. No, Zixval agreed, watching a human demonstrate a backflip just for fun, but I'm not sure the galaxy is ready for human sports, at least not without a few centuries of preparation. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 standard hours when the Void Swarm attacked. The irony wasn't lost on Ambassador Sarah Chen. They had been debating whether humans were too dangerous to allow unrestricted access to galactic society when an actual threat emerged from deep space. Multiple quantum ruptures detected, announced the Council Eye. Void Swarm entities emerging in sectors 7 through 12. Standard containment protocols have failed. High Counselor Vixara's 4 eyes widened in terror. Impossible. Our quantum barriers are impassable. They were, Chen interrupted, already accessing her comm unit. Until the swarm adapted, that's what they do. That's what makes them so dangerous. She turned to the panicking alien delegates. How long since your last major conflict? 3,000 cycles, someone answered. We achieved perfect harmony. You achieved stagnation, Chen corrected, which is fine, until you meet something that never stops evolving. She activated her quantum link. This is Ambassador Chen initiating Emergency Protocol Omega. Authorization, Terra Prime. The Council Chamber's holoscreen filled with alerts as human ships began emerging from jump points throughout the sector. Not the sleek, automated vessels favored by the Galactic Alliance, but rugged warships bearing the scars of actual combat. What are you doing? Vixara demanded. Saving your lives, Chen replied calmly. You've spent millennia perfecting your technology while forgetting how to fight. We humans never had that luxury. Computer, tactical overview. The hologram shifted, showing the approaching Void Swarm. a seething mass of biomechanical horrors that devoured everything in their path. Alongside it appeared human tactical assessments, combat projections, and what looked like hastily improvised battle plans. "Those can't be accurate," protested the technocracy's representative. "Your species has never encountered the swarm before. You can't possibly." "We've been preparing for something like this since we first looked at the stars," Chen interrupted. "Humanity has simulated every possible first contact scenario, including hostile ones. We call it science fiction. Now, please be quiet while I coordinate our defense." The alien delegates watched in amazement as human ships moved into position, not in the precise, A-controlled formations they were used to, but in fluid, unpredictable patterns that somehow made perfect sense. "First wave incoming," reported the Council Eye. "Swarm entities are attempting to establish quantum dominance." "Not today," Chen smiled. On screen, human ships executed maneuvers that should have torn them apart. "You see, while you were worried about us being too aggressive, too unpredictable, we were preparing. Every human oddity you've complained about, they're features, not bugs." The first clash between human forces and the Void Swarm was unlike anything the Council had ever witnessed. Where their own automated defenses had failed, human ships danced through combat with impossible precision. Pilots pulled maneuvers that violated standard safety protocols, crews worked in conditions that would have incapacitated most species, and weapon systems were used in ways their designers had never intended. That's not how quantum torpedoes are supposed to work," stammered a technocracy engineer as they watched a human cruiser use its weapons in a way that somehow created a cascading reaction through the swarm's neural network. "Really?" Chen replied absently while coordinating another strike. "Funny how often we hear that phrase. That's not how it's supposed to work. Yet somehow it does. You know why?" She turned to face the Council. "Because we never accepted limitations. Every time someone told us something was impossible, we took it as a challenge." On screen, human Marines were boarding a swarm vessel, a tactic that had been deemed suicidal by all major military powers. Yet somehow, they were succeeding, turning the swarm's own biomechanical systems against it. "This is why we exercise in high gravity," Chen explained. "Why we drink stimulants and practice combat sports. Why we push ourselves beyond normal limits. Not because we're aggressive, but because we know that somewhere out there, something like the swarm exists. And when we met it, we needed to be ready." The battle continued for hours. The Council watched as humans employed strategies that seemed to make no logical sense until they worked. Engineering teams repurposed civilian technology into weapons. Marines demonstrated why their excessive physical training was actually vital combat preparation. Scientists who had been dismissed as too primitive used their crude understanding of quantum mechanics to find weaknesses in the swarm's defenses. "They're retreating," announced the AA finally. "Swarm entities are entering quantum retreat across all sectors." The Council chamber erupted in relieved celebration, but Chen wasn't finished. She stood, addressing the still assembled delegates. "Now," she said quietly, but with enough authority to silence the room, "let's talk about those restrictions you were planning to impose on humanity." I believe those concerns may have been somewhat overstated," Vixara admitted. "You fear us because we're different," Chen continued, "because we don't fit your notion of how civilized beings should act. But today showed you why that difference is valuable. The galaxy is vast and full of surprises. Some of them aren't pleasant. When those surprises come, you don't want a civilization that's perfect and predictable. You want allies who know how to think differently, act decisively, and yes, sometimes break the rules." She gestured to the tactical display, still showing the aftermath of the battle. "This is why we train so hard, why we push boundaries, why we never stop exploring and adapting. Not because we want to fight, but because we want to survive. And today, that preparation didn't just save us, it saved you too." The Council chamber was silent as the implications sank in. Their perfect, orderly civilization had been helpless against the swarm. Yet humans, unpredictable, aggressive, primitive humans, had prevailed. Perhaps, Vixara suggested carefully, we should discuss expanding our military and scientific cooperation with Earth. Chen smiled. I thought you'd never ask. But first, I need coffee. It's been a long day, and we humans have this strange habit of celebrating survival with stimulants. As she left the chamber, Chen could hear the aliens beginning to debate the implications of what they'd witnessed. They still didn't fully understand humans, but maybe now they understood why that unpredictability, that constant drive to push limits and break barriers, wasn't just a quirk of evolution. It was survival. And in a galaxy full of unknown threats, maybe that's exactly what they needed.